Thank you for stopping by. I want to premise this video by saying that it is designed not as a tutorial, but as like a knit with me option if you happen to want to knit, and then have something playing in the background that isn't as distracting as a full-on engaging YouTube video, but isn't music either, is if you're like me, you find that several hours into watching something, you have not knit as much as you would have liked to, and you're just neck deep in YouTube videos, or you want to listen to a playlist and happen to reminisce about songs, or you're just flipping through to find something else to listen to, and then you're wasting time finding something to keep you kind of distracted or something going on in the background instead of focusing on your knitting. So thank you for stopping by, and I would like to share with you what I'm working on right now. This is a doggy sweater from Wool and the Gang, and it's the Dog's Life coat, and it's considered easy pattern, and this is the pattern book that came with it. It is designated as an easy. It's knit flat with two pieces that are seamed together. And if you're like me, you don't like seaming things or weaving in ends. Those are two things I really don't like about knitting, and they kind of give me a little bit of anxiety, at least with seaming. So I actually am working on a second one. I've already completed one. Let me show you. This is also the Dog's Life coat, and it's knit with the Wool and the Gang Super Trooper yarn. It came in a kit, and it comes in a bag like so. You get all the yarn you need, and depending on what size you pick from their website, and I'll link that in the description, and it comes with the Super Trooper yarn for the size sweater that you need to knit for the dog, and you also get a darning needle and the pattern booklet. So for that particular sweater that I have already knit, I used their Super Trooper wool. As I mentioned, it's a 100% merino wool superwash, and it was in the color pink blush, and it's worsted weight. So at the time that I bought the kit online, it didn't have a color that I wanted that was in stock of the yarn, so I ended up buying another grouping of yarn from a different website, and I used loveknitting.com to get the color that I'm working with now. And my lighting is a little bit off. This is reading like a deeper blue in the phone here, but it's actually like a teal, like a deep teal. And I will link to the yarn that I used for the one I'm working on now, and it's Plymouth Select Worsted Merino Superwash. So it's 100% Superwash Fine Merino Wool, and it's in the color, let me see, it doesn't list exactly, but it says color 62. So I'll link to the Love Knitting site and that color that I used. So if you really like the color, or you want to also use Plymouth yarn for your sweater you knit later, or if you have another doggy sweater in mind that you want to knit that isn't particularly this one, then you're welcome to do that. I will say that knitting the small pink one first was a bad idea, because I got through it pretty quickly, considering that I am I would say, novice beginner knitter. I've been knitting for about a year now, and it was really easy to do. Getting the gauge was tricky, but other than that, I was able to whip through it pretty quick for my skill level, and I wish I had done the bigger one first, because it would allow me to feel very, I guess, a good sense of achievement, essentially, getting the other one done, since it's smaller and I could get it done quicker. But now that I'm doing the larger one a second time, I'm kind of like trudging through it. And with my schedule and everything like that, I find that sometimes getting in the mood to knit is a little tricky for me, which is usually why I prefer to watch YouTube videos, because that gives me a chance to be a little bit distracted, but engaged at the same time with what I'm working on, just to have a little bit of background noise. And before, I would actually listen to my partner who used to stream on Twitch, and that really was a nice way to kind of have a little background noise that I didn't have to like switch channels or pause or anything like that. It was just continuously going. After dinner, I get home and they're already kind of engaged with their audience streaming, and I just kind of sit on the couch, do my knitting, and carry on with my evening. But then they stopped doing that, and I had to find something else to keep me occupied, and I would say I would watch, if I did have Netflix, watch it. I haven't really been engaged with it lately, but I feel like I would want to be more focused on what I'm seeing visually and hearing than just knitting along to something in the background. And I feel like I might be to miss something, especially if there's body language involved or interesting scenery. So I resorted to YouTube. And as much as I love watching YouTube just for entertainment, I found it very distracting when trying to use the same things I found interesting just for general leisure to apply to knitting. So I'm hoping that with this channel, I am not only just talking to myself, but maybe talking to like-minded people who find that whatever you like to watch generally on YouTube is just a little bit too much engagement in regard of needing to look up at the screen to knit, and then you might lose your place. But if you're a pro, you probably can watch something straight and not need to look at your work, but I'm not at that level. I slip stitches by accident or drop stitches, not drastically, but just enough to like, oh, I need to catch myself and pay closer attention to what I'm working on. And watching a YouTube video sometimes isn't quite efficient in that matter. So, as I mentioned earlier, weaving in ends, or mainly just seaming, is a little bit nerve-wracking for me, and that's one of the reasons why I wish I did not pick up this pattern, though it is beginner, so it gives me an idea of how a sweater is constructed, or at least a little doggy coat. And these are gifts, by the way, so I do want them to come out looking pretty good. But if they're not 100% perfect, I don't think the doggies are going to care too much about that, and I am sure the owners of the doggies will be very appreciative that they're getting a handmade gift. And it's right now mid-May, give or take, depending on how you count your middle of the month. It's about mid-May, honestly, and I'm knitting these for holiday gifts, so later in December. But because of my schedule and because of how slow I knit, and like I mentioned earlier, just getting kind of motivated to get in the knitting zone, I know I need to start now. And that's why I already did the other sweater, because I got a head start on it and I just wanted to start as soon as I could after I got all of the materials I needed. And so these sweaters and a couple hats and some socks and some wraps are things that I am working on as holiday gifts. So I'm hoping in the next couple videos I can show you more of the projects that I'm working on for these holiday gifts, and then maybe if I am diligent enough, I will be done with the gifts and able to work on some more personal projects. And honestly, considering I've been knitting since last March, I have only knit 2 items for myself. One I have already, actually I haven't even blocked them, but I was wearing one just out and about last year, and it was a scarf. It was my seed stitch scarf that I started as my first project after practicing knitting. And if you have not started to knit yourself, I will link the video that I watched to learn how to knit. And it's actually interesting because the person I watched holds her yarn in her right hand, and I'm left-handed. So you would think I would hold it in my left hand, but because I was watching a tutorial, I didn't really think of it, like where I needed to hold the yarn to feel comfortable. And honestly, holding it with my right hand is pretty comfortable for me. And it's when I've dabbled in crochet briefly, and I will show you where that came into play later on in another video, holding the yarn in my left hand actually felt a little odd. And it's not that I'm ambidextrous, I think it's just because I had knit early on using my right hand to hold the yarn that I just kind of felt comfortable like that. I got used to it enough because it was the first experience I had like that I didn't feel weird about it, if that makes sense. So I'm just knitting this here flat. I don't know if I already mentioned that, but it's knit flat, and they're 2 pieces. So this is the back piece, and then the second part is the chest piece, and then you seam them together. And that part, whew, I don't know. I really just, as much as I have to do it and get used to doing it and doing it well, it always bothers me because I really want it to come out nicely, and 2, I have a hard time gauging not only where it lines up, but the back side and the front side, and making sure I'm actually seaming together the right side, because sometimes it curls and I'm not sure where the actual end of the row is, and it's harder to gauge that for me with really fuzzy or like halo-y yarn. But this one, this merino wool that Wool in the Gang provided, was not as challenging, but it was still, I just wanted to make sure it was perfect, you know, since it's going to be a gift, and I want it to fit comfortably on the doggy and everything like that. So I will say that the pattern comes in 5 sizes. You have to purchase the kit to get the pattern. At least at this point of making the video, Wool in the Gang does not sell their patterns separately. You have to buy a whole kit, which includes the yarn, and I personally bought it on sale. They were having a 40% off sale on their yarn kits at the time, and it was at the tail end, or actually at the beginning of this year, and I think that was because they were clearing out a lot of their more winter styles to integrate in like their spring and summer knit kits, so people can kind of get ready for the spring and summer seasons. But unfortunately, the color yarn that I wanted to use for the larger sweater was out of stock, so I chose to go with the smaller sweater size I needed, or I guess it's called a coat. The coat size I needed to make the one for the little doggy. And I wanted blue for the bigger dog. Same family, different households, I guess you'd say. So my brother, honestly, for the bigger dog, and my cousin's dog. And I live in a different state than them, so I was even more motivated to start as early as I could to have these ready for the holidays so I can mail them out to them in time. Because I can't guarantee I'm going to be able to visit them in person with these, which would give me a little more time to finish them. But considering that last year, even though I started knitting in March, I did not finish all the knitting projects I wanted to provide as holiday gifts. So this year is actually some carryover of last year's ideas that I didn't get to complete, and I knew I needed to hunker down and get started. So as soon as, actually into December, I was working on one of the projects that's still not done yet, which I'll probably show you guys later when I have gotten far into video shooting with other projects that I have going on. So as a reason to kind of engage you, I'm curious. You heard that I don't like seaming things. Weaving in ends isn't the funnest, but I can do it, and I'm not too bad at it. But what are some things you do not like about the process of knitting? And what are some things you enjoy about the process of knitting? I'll give you a positive. I like when I'm so far into a pattern that I can start to see it come to life. Sometimes the first few rows, if it's not a very intricate pattern or very pronounced pattern, it kind of looks very plain to me, and I'm not really into it until I'm like several rows in and I can start to see how the pattern's forming and how the stitches are working together to create what I'm working on, and that is really motivating. So it's like, okay, now it's all making sense, And I also like, of course, when it's done and it's blocked and it's already in the hands of the person that I am presenting it to, and they really like it. So I actually have a tub of some projects that I've completed that I haven't blocked yet, and the pink version of the sweater is one of them. I am debating on if I'm going to do them closer to the holiday season, or once it starts to warm up here, I might just start blocking them in batches so that they dry faster in the summer weather than if I was waiting for them to dry off just by having some fans on them in the winter. And plus, running fans when I have the heater on isn't ideal. So I think maybe this summer, maybe leave them out for a bit or something. Not like out directly in the sun, but just enough that they can get some air, dry quickly, and be nice and fresh so I can wrap them up when it's time. And this particular pattern, I'll go back to this one, I've left it here at home. There's a small knitting group I'm a part of at work, and we generally meet every Friday, or try to at least, and it's not all of us. There's several people kind of in the group, but not everybody can come to every session. But Fridays during lunch, those of us who do have a knitting project we're working on will get together in a space that's available, and we'll just knit for about an hour or so. Chat like we're doing here and just work on our projects, and I really enjoy that. But because of the infrequency of it, I'm usually just knitting every day on my lunch break when I do have lunch at work anyway. So it's not any different than what I do at work, but this is definitely a one-way kind of conversation until I get some more activity here where I can answer questions and things in the next videos. And I want to say right now that I'm going to upload maybe 3 or 4 videos in a batch. So if you do have questions or comments, go ahead and leave them in the comments section, and then the next time I do an upload after I've reviewed everything, then I'll definitely answer some things if I, one, deem they're appropriate to answer or can answer. So that's what's going on there. So I'm hoping to have this be really interactive, but because of my schedule, at least right now, I have the opportunity to record a few of these with the projects I'm working on so that you can also knit along, look up every now and then, and see what's going on. If you don't want to be too engaged, that's fine, because since the point of this one is just to kind of have some noise going on in the background for you where you don't have to follow along with any kind of tutorial. And I don't think I'm at the level where I could show you a tutorial unless I was something myself that it's easy to explain, but I find so much inspiration tutorial-wise with Stacy Perry, who you may already know if you're active on the YouTube knitting community. She posts a lot of videos where she's either reviewing products, or she's doing a knitting tutorial on a different pattern she has. Either she's made it up on her own, or she's using one provided either through sponsorship, or people have asked her questions about it, or what have you. And I think she's great. There are definitely many people out there who have great tutorials, and often I'm referring to them when I come across something in a pattern I have that just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I'm looking at the photos, and I'll mention there's another video coming up where I talk about that, where I had to refer to somebody's how-to to kind of get started because the photos and the pattern I was looking at just weren't cutting it for me. And it could just be me. Sometimes I have to do it, I have to see it happening in order for it to make sense to me. And if you're the same way, let me know. If you actually have any people that inspire you to knit, or if you're learning how to knit and somebody taught you, let me know. I'm interested in to find out what that's like for everybody. A lot of people that I talk to at work learn to knit from relatives, but I don't have any that knit. My grandmother, who actually crocheted this quilt behind me, she passed away when I was very, very young, but she was a really big crocheter. She would compete in like fairs or festivals, and I really wish I was old enough to learn that skill from her, several blankets that are in my family, and I was lucky enough to take a few with me when I moved out of the state. So I keep them away from my kitty cats. Actually, if you could tell by my name, Knittin' Kitten, I like cats a lot. They love them so much, and I have two. And I noticed that when I had this quilt on my bed and they would be kneading or playing around or something, they would snag their claws on it, and I was like, oh, this is an heirloom. Like, I really want to keep this around and keep it in good condition. So I just took it out of commission. It's no longer on the bed. Got it washed up. And I keep it in this room where the kitties are not allowed. So this pattern, I'll go back to this pattern. Like I mentioned, it's knit flat, 2 pieces, seamed together. I leave it here because I prefer that if I have a pattern that jumps a lot with like one grouping of one set of stitch type, and then I'm probably not even using the right terminology, but I have a repeating pattern, but it jumps between a block where it's just one pattern straight through for however many inches or however many rows, and then it switches to another one. If it's a drastic jump, I prefer to leave it here because I actually, in the whole year that I've been knitting, or a little over a year now, I don't have a tape measure, like a fabric one that you would use like if you were a tailor or something. I just have straight rulers. And with that, it's kind of cumbersome to bring to work. I have a ruler at work, but to remember to bring it with me at lunch and to leave it in my office when I come back and not accidentally leave it in my project bag and take it with me somewhere, I just don't want to risk it. And I have a smaller one that I have in a project bag that I use when I travel on the train and things like that, but it's also sharp and pokey, and I don't like to wrestle around with it too much because I don't want it snagging my work. So if I know I have a big jump coming, then I just will leave it here. And I found that it works better that way, especially because this is knit flat and these needles I'm using are actually kind of long. And let me finish this row and I'll show you. And by the way, I have maybe 4 or 5 inches left to knit just in this one chunk before I switch to the next step in the pattern where I knit in a different way, and that's to account for the part that's seamed and then the armholes. So I'm knitting the part that's seamed right now, and then I have to switch to a different knitting pattern in this pattern and knit for the armholes and then knit again to seam the rest. So these, if you can see, it's the Prim, I'm sorry, it's kind of blurry, it's the Prim needles. I got these at hobby.com, and it's a European brand. I think it's Dutch, but I'll link it below. And actually, Stacey Perry from Very Pink Knits did review this brand. I can't remember if she had circular needle or if it was a DPN or if it was a single. It might have been a single, honestly, because she mentioned how they could snap together. And because I value her opinion, and when I was buying some yarn from the site and I happened to see that I didn't meet my free shipping quota yet and they had these, I was like, why don't I just pick up a set? I needed a size 8. That's a common size for worsted weight anyway, and I do knit a lot with worsted weight. At least a lot of the projects I've encountered are with worsted weight, and these are relatively long. These are, I think, that 14-inch length needle. I don't have any others just hanging about to measure for sure, but I did line them up with my ruler that's 12 inches, and they were a little bit longer, so I think this is a 14-inch. It has this kind of bulby point, and it helps catch the stitches so they're not just sliding. I mean, they would essentially slide off, but it's easier to kind of scoop them up because you don't just have a point that's kind of leading nowhere, but a little bit of a little scoop there, I guess you could call it. She does a lot better job of explaining these. The shaft part is triangular so that the stitches actually slide on the needle better, and then this part right past the bulb kind of needle point area is circular. So you get your gauge, and this first like inch and a half of the needle, maybe not even that, maybe just the first inch or so before it either tapers into the bulb part or becomes this triangular shaft area. So it makes for quick knitting. It's plastic too, and if you look at the end where the stopper is, there's like this little divot and the needles can snap. Let me see if I can show you. Let me see if I could do it the right way, because I honestly don't snap them together. And I'm probably wasting your time. Oh, wait. Well, you may have heard it, but it did snap on this end. It's secure, and it's not like a super good hold, but at least they're together, so you don't have to worry about buying a separate needle pair thingy so that they would stick together. So if you had them in like a jar or case, that you wouldn't have to worry about finding its mate, because they would just be stuck together by each other. So onward. I didn't want this video to be too long, but I did want to let you know about this pattern. I'm going to link it, at least how to get to it, on Wool and the Gang's site, so that if you are interested in knitting a flat coat for a dog, they have several sizes available, and they explain the size range. So of course, if you want to measure up your dog, if you have the ability to, but since I'm knitting this as a gift, I just kind of had to go with the dog description of what size best would fit the pooches I was knitting these for. But if you do have your own dog and you want to knit this, go ahead. I would say measure them so you know what size to get exactly. But if you're a little bit off, I don't think it's going to be that bad. And of course, you could always adjust it later, I think. I honestly don't know how to tailor knits to make them smaller, but I would say going a little, I don't even know, bigger. Do you think it's better to go a little big? So, not that the dog would grow into it, heaven forbid they get a little bit rounder, but at least you can make adjustments, I think, if you needed to. Rip it out, sew it back up, seam it a little bit closer if you needed to, and then because it's this worsted weight wool, it has a little bit of a bounce to it, so it will stretch, and then you have the knit itself that's a bit stretchy. So if it's a little small, as long as it's not too snug, I don't think the dog would mind too much. But if your dog is really particular about clothes, you might not even want to knit them this, because then, you know, you spent all that time knitting it. So then you probably want to buy like a stuffy and then put it on that for decoration so it doesn't go to waste, unless you know somebody else with a similar dog, or you, I don't know if shelters would take donated clothes for like adoption days so they look cute, what have you. So I think we'll just end it here for this one, and I plan on uploading a couple others probably the same day, so you might see me again in the same outfit, where I talk about some of the other projects that I'm working on and just carry on the conversation from there. So thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, of course, if you're familiar with YouTube, you know you want to hit subscribe and give me a like, and I'll see you in the next one.